A fundamental divide between professional survival and absolute catastrophe at sea isn't the depth of the water, but the rigor of the training that precedes the descent. If we look at the history of industrial accidents, specifically the darker corners of our global logs, a chilling pattern emerges. The vast majority of tragedies weren't unavoidable twists of fate. They were the logical conclusion of inadequate preparation. When a diver goes down to 80 meters using basic scuba gear just to cut some metal ties, they aren't just doing a difficult job, they're participating in a technical suicide because they lack the training to understand that international protocols exist specifically to prevent that kind of madness.
It's a stark reality. That scenario you mentioned, the lone diver with a tank on their back at extreme depths, is the definition of the anarchy we've discussed. In a professional setting, once you pass that 30-meter mark, you've crossed a physical and legal threshold where self-management is no longer an option. It's a wall. Beyond 30 meters, the physics of gas and pressure change so radically that any scientific or research activity loses its recreational exemption under laws like Sicily's Law No. 7 of 2016. At that point, the law demands you treat the dive as a high-stakes industrial event requiring strict training and meticulous planning.
That 30-meter threshold in the Sicilian legislation is fascinating because it's not just an arbitrary number. It serves as a clear indicator of where the risk profile shifts. If you're doing scientific work deeper than 30 meters, you can't just rely on standard dive certificates. You're legally required to have the same training baggage as a commercial diver. It's about acknowledging that the environment doesn't care why you're there. Whether you're studying coral or repairing a pipeline, the physiological demands are identical.
The environment is completely indifferent to your intentions. We've seen the cost of ignoring this in the most painful ways. Think about the tragedy involving 5 Italian divers in a submerged cave system. They were well past that 30-meter wall in a hyper-hostile, confined environment. When you analyze events like that, it becomes clear that advanced, specific, hyperbaric training, the kind that is parameterized for those exact hostile depths, could have been the difference between a successful mission and a recovery operation. You cannot approximate safety at those depths.
And that's where the institutional weight of a place like Cedifop comes in. We aren't talking about a local school handing out participation trophies. Cedifop is the International Diving Schools Association Study Centre in Italy, and it's currently one of only 16 schools in the entire world recognised as a full member of IDSA. It's the only one in Italy. That status isn't just a label. It means their training is audited against a global gold standard that most schools simply cannot meet.
Being a full member of IDSA is an elite credential. To reach that level, a school has to prove it has the infrastructure, the staff, and the curriculum to produce divers who can work anywhere in the world. Cedifop isn't just teaching people how to breathe underwater. They're training industrial professionals in the use of ventilated helmets, the management of the umbilical, which is the diver's life support, communication, and power all in one, and the scientific planning of decompression times. They're using the same rigorous criteria established by the International Marine Contractors Association, or IMCA.
The umbilical system is really the hallmark of professional safety compared to the autonomy of scuba, isn't it? With scuba, you're on a clock, and that clock is your tank. If something goes wrong, you're alone with your limited air. With the surface-supplied systems taught at Cedifop, you have an uninterrupted air feed, constant voice communication with a supervisor on the surface, and often a camera on your helmet so they can see exactly what you see. It turns a solitary risk into a team-managed operation.
It completely removes the loneliness of the diver. But even with the best gear, the human element remains the most vulnerable point. History has taught us this lesson repeatedly, and often at a horrific price. If you go back to the mid-19th century, to 1854 on Lake Erie, there's a case involving a diver named John Tope. He was testing experimental equipment, and he lost his life because the exhausted air wouldn't escape the system. He essentially suffocated inside his own suit. That was a tragedy born from a lack of scientific control over respiration, the very thing modern IDSA standards are designed to master.
It's haunting to think that even with 170 years of progress, we still see accidents that mirror those early failures because someone decided to cut corners on training. The accounting of blood we've seen in the accident logs shows that the deadly mix is usually inadequate equipment paired with a total lack of risk awareness. A diver who hasn't been through a centre like Cedifop might not even know they have the right to refuse a dangerous dive.
That is perhaps the most vital part of the curriculum, the culture of awareness. A qualified industrial diver knows the law. They know what equipment must be on the surface before they even touch the water. They understand their right and their duty to say no if the employer isn't guaranteeing safety. Training is the shield. When the market demands professionals who have been through these elite centres, the pirate companies that try to save money on the lives of their workers get squeezed out.
It feels like we're seeing a shift where safety is no longer viewed as a bureaucratic hurdle or an extra cost, but as the foundational element of a profession of excellence. The synergy between Sicily's pioneering legislation and the global standards of IDSA and IMCA provides a roadmap. If we can standardize this level of training everywhere, we might actually stop that grim tally in the accident logs.
Stopping the accounting of pain requires a commitment to the fact that there are no shortcuts. When you use the scientific planning of bottom times, when you master the gas mixtures, and when you respect the 30-meter wall, you aren't just following rules. You're ensuring that every diver who goes down has the greatest right of all, the right to finish their shift and return home to their family. That's what excellence in training actually looks like in practice.
The transition from an era of underwater anarchy to one of professional safety is ultimately a journey of education. By moving away from the improvisation of the past and embracing the rigorous standards of institutions like Cedifop, we protect not just the workers, but the integrity of the entire industry. It's a shift from seeing the seabed as a lawless abyss to recognizing it as a workplace that demands the highest level of human and technical precision.
It's about professional dignity. A diver who is trained to IDSA standards isn't just an employee. They're a specialist in an environment that is naturally hostile to human life. Their training allows them to work within that environment with a level of control and predictability that would have been unimaginable to the pioneers of the 19th century. We have the tools and the laws now. The challenge is ensuring that no one is allowed to bypass them.
And that challenge remains ongoing. Every time a new diver enters a training program, we're making a choice about what kind of industry we want to have. Do we want one that relies on luck, or one that relies on the armored qualifications of international bodies? The evidence from the history of accidents makes the choice for us. Safety isn't an option, it's the prerequisite for the job.
The goal is clear. We want that Excel file of tragedies to stop growing. With the combination of the Sicily model of legislation and the excellence of training provided by the few elite schools worldwide, we finally have a concrete hope of making that a reality. It's about transforming a high-risk gamble into a profession of global standing.
As we've seen, the depth of the water is never the real enemy. The real enemy is the lack of knowledge. By supporting these standards and demanding excellence, we can finally close the books on the silent massacre of the past and look toward a future where the abyss is no longer a place of fear, but a place of expertise. Please share this episode with anyone who values safety and professional excellence in the world's most challenging environments.